Challenge of the present, the future of economy. Panel discussion organized by the Hungarian Association of Executives. Panelists: Dr. József Goldfárth, MOL Group, Head of Oilfield Chemicals and Technologies; Ákos Hegedüs, Linde Gas, Hungary, Managing Director; Ákos Janza, MSCI Managing Director, Head of Enterprise Transformation, and Global Head of Offices. Moderator: Borbála, Czakó, Executive of awardee of the Hungarian Association of Executives and Shell Hungary's Joint Manager of the Year for Society Special Award.
Köszöntöm a kedves nézőket, hallgatókat. A főcímünk a jelen kihívása a jövő vállalatvezetése, de mi most a gazdaság jövőjéről fogunk beszélni. Tegnap olvastam, itt kiszedtem az IMF-nek az előrejelzését, és azt kell, hogy mondjam, hogy a tavalyi 66,1%-ról most már 3,6-re csökkentette a világgazdasági növekedésnek a mértékét. Ákos szeretném kérdezni Janza Ákost, hogy mi az 5 legnagyobb kihívás, amivel a vállalat most szembenéz globálisan. Te globális szinten vagy, tehát biztos jó látképet tudsz erről adni.
Köszönöm, Bori, a meghívást. Igen, hát nyilván arról azért viták folynak, hogy a stagfláció mi okoz, de azért az látszik, hogy a magas infláció és a supply chain-nek hirtelen megállás azért eléggé problémás helyzet elé állított mindenkit. Nyilván ezt kombináljuk még a Covid-dal, ami azért még nem szűnt meg, bár azt gondolhatnánk itt Budapestről, a sánghái kollégáim 3-4 hete nem nagyon tudnak kijutni a lakásaikból, és tulajdonképpen mi vásárolunk élelmiszert és küldjük el nekik az élelmiszert más cégekkel közösen. Azért ennek a kombinációja azt gondolom, hogy egy elég komoly kihívás elé fog minket állítani. Nyilván
that will pose a big challenge for all of us, and of course there will be an inflation in wages, and then it will be even more difficult for us to find the right colleagues and the workforce. So actually you all share, I think, my idea when saying that it's very difficult to find a labor force nowadays. Again, the war, the crisis between Russia and Ukraine is something that even if not MSCI ourselves, but actually our customers are impacted by them. So actually we only had 2 employees working in the Ukraine, and they left already the country. Already we have some exposures in Russia, and through our indices we are there and we purchase the data from there, but MSCI currently is carrying out its operational activities and serving its companies, so it stopped all these activities in Russia. The conflict has any impact on your indices? Well, if we look at the MSCI indices and anybody else's, then Russia is put in the uninvestable category. So as in terms of ESG, the exposure is much lower because these are energy areas, fossil companies are that I am talking about, and the ones who produce, and even within emerging market, there is quite a thin exposure there that we can see there. So clearly, what we can see, and that is the biggest challenge, is and what is something investors are thinking about is that ESG funds have so far been neglecting products of military producers because ESG products are morally directed. So actually now that we have this conflict, quite many investors started to think about to start investing in these stocks in military, in the military sector. So there is a discussion in society and in economy, and I don't want to actually give you focus about the end result of this discussion. Okay, then let me ask Mr. Hegedüs, as the company executive, that the energy sector is ahead of major challenges. What is your view about this? Thank you very much for the invitation. I think it's not only the energy sector, but all the other companies are ahead of challenges, major challenges, and situations where we have to make decisions fast. So the company executive in such a situation is responsible to make sure that products are delivered to customers on time and that the customers are satisfied, and also that the supply chain is operated properly. So in the past years, these are the things that have been made impossible or uncertain. We had the COVID appearing, and then the employees had to learn to work in a new environment, a new culture. Then came the energy crisis, which impacts not only the energy sector, but any company who uses energy. And of course, on top of that, we have this Ukraine-Russia conflict that actually has a huge impact on the abilities of suppliers to supply goods. So I think that the past had a normal kind of situation, and then in the past, even if only one of the three situations I'm mentioning was at risk, then actually a couple of weeks was enough for company executives to make decisions and to set their activities on a new path. But currently, it's something like juggling with balls, three balls at the same time. So everything is quite uncertain, and then therefore they have to think about how to stabilize the environment for their employees, and also they have to think about how to bring a profit, and of course it has quite an impact on the processes. Of course, in the pharmaceutical industry, so we have quite an exposure. How about in the gas industry? So actually, currently what we use the most is air, and then it's free of charge yet, so we use quite a lot of energy, and clearly that the prices of gas and electricity has tripled. Therefore, our manufacturing costs have increased significantly. There are some areas that are not profitable yet, and we are working on how to make these areas profitable for us. Now, let me ask this question from József. So, from the MOL projects, is it more risky for you to make investments? How do you ensure that they are profitable? So, what do you think about the trends, the overall global trends and their impacts on your company, MOL, the Hungarian oil company? Companies have been, or in the past, used to having stable environments and being able to make forecasts for 20 years ahead. So then came the COVID, then the energy crisis, then the Russian-Ukraine conflict. So all these three factors have led to such a volatility that makes it very difficult for us to make decisions and make forecasts. The ESG regulations, do they make you more difficult to become profitable, or do they make it easier? Well, the European Green Deal is the EGD, the European Green Deal, is something that actually we have to observe, and we have to therefore use this as a set of considerations that gives us a compass to follow, so that we can develop our long-term strategies in our companies by validating, by using these considerations to validate them. Well, what ESG regulations and challenges can you think ahead of us? So the greenwashing will be a topic for us, and then we discussed it through the email conversation we had before. So currently there are 35 regulators working in 12 different countries to make some regulation and develop some regulation. So the ESG as a regulation is something that will not dictate us to do something in the short term in terms of investment. So we are not going to invest in certain funds because then they will perform better tomorrow than a more risky portfolio, but because we think that in the longer term we do good to the economy if we invest in those funds, and the non-fossil fuels are something that can support the Paris Agreement targets to achieve, so that we can keep the heating, the global heating under certain levels as dictated by the Paris Agreement. I think that this is what the real question for companies will be, is that the companies who produce reports like MSCI, for instance, so how they will be able to confirm that the data they report reflects reality. And also we have to come to agreement between the various regulators and the ESG regulators as well, so that companies like MOL and some others can actually produce reports that are credible as they produce their quarterly reports towards the Hungarian Stock Exchange. And how much do you have an opportunity to check whether these reports reflect reality? I think that technology helps us a lot, because actually we not only use human eyes and hands to read these reports, and actually we have an open methodology used towards our customers and also towards the data suppliers. So actually we try and explain to them how to give us information and reports so that they are transparent and easy to interpret for us and compare with others. So this is why one of our areas of activities is to explain all this to our customers. Of course, one can always cheat, but this is not our purpose. Okay, so Ákos, Hegedüs, let me ask that greening and making independent. So these are targets that will be costly. How the end users will pay for these end results? Well, this is a very good question. And what I can start by answering is that in the past 1.5 years, I have had about 600 companies that we were having negotiations with about the greening that we want to achieve, including hydrogen, to be used, and there are only 200 of them who can really show something feasible in our case. So I think that economically it also must be feasible, not only technologically. But I always ask these questions, therefore, from them, that are they going to be able to pass it on to their prices towards customers? So will they have enough customers to pay for all these technologies in steel industry and in the paper industry and so on and so on? So I think that we have to have these amounts invested in new technology, and also the OPEX that we have. So all these elements, of course, will need to be paid by customers, and unless we have recovery of those funds, we cannot make any steps ahead. So let me ask what your idea is about greenwashing. Well, it's quite easy to deceive customers, but of course customers keep getting informed, and also regulators try and be quite transparent, and the methodologies they use are becoming more and more transparent. I would like to draw company executives' attention to the fact that the ESG companies will increase in number. So actually customers will expect companies to observe these aspects, and then actually in a short period of time all companies will need to implement methodologies like that, and therefore they have to select maybe some consultants to help them in implementing these methodologies, and they don't want to fall into the trap that they embark on projects that cannot meet these new regulations and then can qualify as greenwashing, which will be punished by regulators and customers alike. Now, the question comes to all the three of you, that what are the 5 major challenges ahead of you to your company, to our company, to the company, and also from the aspect of ESG. So both. Well, the ESG-based operations, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that basically the ESG-based operations is something that is pressed by societies, and regulators react to that because financial markets started to package these in their portfolios, financial portfolios, and they start to make calculations on an ESG basis and look at companies' performance on an ESG basis. Therefore, the regulators will have to react to that, and then it is blowing like a snowballing, and then it becomes the mainstream. So, as Vilmos mentioned, the regulators, the question, so who will finance this? It's a pity that we don't have nobody from a bank to explain us how this actually looks in terms of our exposure in a Green Deal like that. So I think these three questions will be ahead of us all through this year. And I think climate risk, because of the climate change, will always be ahead of us. And then the reactions to be made by customers is something that is very important. So no wonder that we actually relocated our climate risk research center into Budapest, because we want to see how the climate situation will impact our exposures. Biodiversity is another aspect, so how we look at the world. 1/3 of CO2 emissions actually come from food chains and food industry. So, and the last major challenge that we can already see ahead of us in terms of the COVID pandemic, that by 2050 we think that about 10 million people will die only because of the reason that the antibiotics that have so far been successful will no longer be sufficient to treat, because the human body will not react to them. So I think that these are challenges that we have to start thinking about and talking about already today, even though we cannot expect to have a good solution to all of them in the short term. Ákos. Well, as a company executive, I want to say that in the short term, of course, stability is the major challenge ahead of us, because we want to regain stability in this new environment in which we have to operate. And of course, now environment protection or CO2 emissions reduction are something that are targets that we want to achieve also. And for that purpose, we have to make a decision that by year 2025 or 2027, we have to ensure that some projects will have to be implemented by that time. Of course, we use quite many advisory companies giving us advices, but no decisions have yet been made. So I have talked to quite many major company executives, and nobody has ever made any decisions about that, and I cannot see that they want to make decisions. So if really want to significantly reduce CO2 emissions, then of course we have to make decisions on making certain investments. Well, about company executives, the major challenges in year 2022 is the COVID-related impacts, and to handle that and hoping to mitigate the impacts. And of course, the energy challenge, energy volatility is the second major, and stagflation is something that we must expect, and capital costs, funding costs will increase, and then sustainability-related issues and expectations and related investments are questions that will be relevant for many companies. And maybe the technological issue is also important, whether these investments that are needed for addressing these problems are not yet mature enough. So as Mr. Kapitány mentioned, there is no one single solution, one for all sides. So we have still many different possibilities ahead of us, but also customers change their behavior. So actually the risks in terms of making investments is something that have to be evaluated by company executives. Let me ask that in relation to resources and competencies of employees, do you find any changes in what you need? Absolutely. The future challenge ahead of companies is that as the core business is outside the comfort zone now, we need to introduce new technologies employees. We need to get familiar with new technologies. Therefore, we do not necessarily have the competent employees, and therefore we have to find the necessary technological partners, researchers, and research institutions, and establish partnerships with them. So for future collaboration is something that will be very important here. How about MSCI? What is your opinion here? Well, clearly we keep changing technologies and we keep trying to serve even more premium customers. So our customers are institutional investors, major banks, major insurance companies, and of course we offer our services at premium prices. Therefore, we want to provide premium services to our customers. So this is this has been a continuous process, but I think what has changed for us even is the speed of these changes. So as transformation manager for myself is that the biggest challenge is how to be faster in changing our culture. So far it was 2 to 3 years before we could do these changes. Let me give you an example. A Salesforce. So what techniques are safe for Salesforce we use, and how I can automate better my processes. So this is a technological challenge. But then how my people will use this new technology, how I can persuade them this adoption rate must change and it accelerates. It's something that is a major challenge, just like in the automotive industry, that every half a year you have a new brand on the market, and then we ourselves are in this situation that we have to be able to convince our own employees that these new technologies will be better than the previous one. But the change should not be as fast as it disrupts our operations, that impacts our incomes. So I know that you are in contact with 5 continents on a daily basis, but therefore let me ask you, which is the region that is the best prepared? That's a good question. I haven't thought about that before. Each region, of course, has its respective challenges. I still believe in India, for instance. I still believe in China very much. And even though back in the 80s, Japan was actually in the forefront of innovation. I think that Hungarians are very much in the forefront as well, and I am proud of that. And then financial centers have actually made a big move before and after COVID, so their activities have been about sales. But now that we actually can witness this inflation of salaries in this region, of course also in India and in the US, in our region, it inflates faster than in other regions. So actually the major challenge here will be whether we are able in future in this country to actually find enough labor force for these problems to be tackled.
Ákos, human resources. Yes, it's a difficult question. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult, especially in Hungary, because for the new technologies we need new types of knowledge which we don't have yet. For example, hydrogen. In Hungary we have no hydrogen technician education at the moment. These will start soon, but by the time that we need to have experts is going to be 5 to 7 years, and they will still not have the experience. They will only have the fundamental knowledge. So I do agree with József saying that we need integrated thinking. So we need there are no corporate environments where all the knowledge is present, and I think it's not possible to have something like that, or it would be very costly to establish something like that. So I think the tendency is most likely to be like in the US, where we see cooperation and collaboration between various fields of expertise, and for that company leaders need to accept profit-sharing mechanisms and new expectations than the original core business expectations. I think we all agree with Mr. Kapitány, who said that those who know the solution is not a good colleague, but I think the good colleagues are the ones who think about new solutions. I'd like to ask József, what do you think is the real drive for change? Is it the regulatory environment or the customers? I think both areas impact each other mutually. I think the regulator is the one who goes a little bit ahead and indirectly tries to shape customer behavior with various programs. Fundamentally, the regulator also expects companies to commit to certain sustainability goals within certain periods of time, but then the companies create products that customers look for. So when customers demand fossil fuel-based solutions, then the companies are going to deliver those. And if customers prefer petrochemical products rather than green or environmentally friendly products, then obviously the market is going to serve these needs. So obviously we have to pay a lot of attention and more attention to awareness raising amongst customers. And I think in this regard, the regulators and the companies both have an important role. We've talked about the slowing down of economic growth, which obviously is not going to drive a move towards renewables or environmentally friendly products. If we were to put together a wish list, if we could have like 3 requests, what would be the things that you would ask for? I will start with Ákos. Well, obviously, I would like to ask for the end of the crisis in Ukraine and putting an end to all this suffering. But if you're asking about this here, yes, it definitely would be ending this conflict in our immediate neighborhood. But I think we will still feel the impact of this, both in the financial markets and other markets and in the food industry. But if there's only one aspect, obviously I don't want to put ranking in this aspect, but yes, it's the conflict, the end of the conflict. Yes, I do agree with that. Okay, if you had a second wish or 3 wishes. If I could have 3 wishes, I would ask for 100 more. Obviously, in this new working environment, workforce stability and the stability of the supply chain are the things that I would like to ask for. Yes, if we were to expect miracles, I would like to see a world where customers realize that by changing their own behaviors, they can have a huge impact through the companies and thus on CO2 emissions and on sustainability. Yes, we are in constant transformation. We see currently a geopolitical shift, economic shift. We see the COVID. What do you think are the leadership traits that are key to success? I think adaptability. How can I evaluate certain situations? How can I provide good answers? I think currently this is the most important, but perhaps even an all-time best. We also talked about visions and strategies, quick decision-making. What are the things that put the greatest hindrance to quick decision-making, and what is key to good decisions? Difficult question. Yes, I'm coming up with increasingly difficult questions. I think there are 3 important elements: buyers, employees, and suppliers. I think these are always changing and managing these changes, and how can we provide stability to our customers, to our suppliers, to our employees. I think this is what brings the basis for success. But obviously a leader currently, and especially over the past 2 years, had to learn and had to recognize that changes do not come at a yearly pacing, but they come weekly, daily, hourly. It might happen that somebody made a decision and then waited for its result to arrive in about a week. And now it could be possible that one has to repeat making decisions hourly. And I think this is a huge challenge. But if a company leader can be successful in this regard, then the company can be successful. József, I know it's a difficult question. I think it's important to realize that with the changing environment, we have to change our corporate culture as well. And I think business decisions that are usually about NPV and returns, how can we keep our goals in mind? For example, do we have these goals incorporated in the KPIs of the company leaders? We have to adapt our processes to these changes. And yes, and then a final question. I am honorary president of the Hungarian Association of Executives, and we have a women's forum providing endless opportunities to women. I'm also wearing a little badge this occasion, and we believe it's very important that there are enough women in leadership. So I'd like to ask about your companies. How's the situation in your organizations? And what do you think are the benefits of having female leaders? I see Ákos already has an answer ready. I was leader of MSCI for 10 years, and I only had 2 male colleagues in the gremium of 10 people. In our leadership, out of 10, we have 3 women. Within the company, the share is 75 to 25, unfortunately. Our company is quite technologically and software engineeringly oriented, so I think we have to do a lot together with HBLF and other organizations to make sure that women are included in these fields. Of course, this can also be analyzed from the perspective of ESG. There's a wonderful research that is published every year, and it clearly shows that if there's a share of women of over 30%, then the company will do better in the stock market. So I'd recommend to all to hire more and more women into their boards, because the company will deliver better. I'd like to tell you that in Belgium, a regulation was issued to make sure that within 7 years, the ratio of women within the board has to reach 30%. So I'm very glad that they provide time for this change, and I think if the share of males would go down to under 30%, that would also not be ideal. I think there should be diversity, because this would ensure successfulness. Thank you for paying attention to us men as well. Today in Hungary, the share of female leaders in the top 500 is around 8%. So this is why we came up with endless opportunities. Infinity is signaled by an 8 on its side and a number 8 on its side. So I think Western Europe is treating better. Yes, our headquarters continuously sets new goals in this regard. In our company, the ratio is 70 to 30. And in spite of the fact that we're a gas company, I think in Hungary this is a good ratio. In our board we have 3 women and 5 gentlemen, and I think this changed over the past few years. It used to be all men management for many years, but I see that female leaders add a lot, and I really like working with them. And my colleagues also share this opinion, their expertise, their calmness, their entirely different approach to critical business decisions provide a much better founded decision-making process. Yes, we are very proud of our results in this regard, which I believe we set as goals in spite of the expectations. And as an oil company, I think we are performing better than our competitors in Hungary and on a group level as well. And we pay a lot of attention to this issue in all fields to this. And I think this is also reflected in our results and achievements. Well, thank you. You can still join our campaign, which started on 8th March. Almost 100 CEOs have joined in Hungary. So all those who feel like it and who can join, I'd like to invite you all to go to HBLF's website to increase the share of female leaders. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope our panel discussion was useful to all of you. Thank you.